Okay, we're here with George Ortega and friends, right? And we're going to have some more conversation on the Free Will, Science, and Religion podcast about why free will is kind of just a waste of brain space. We're animals, we're machines made to be logical. We're supposed to add two plus two and come up with four, and there's no point in being free to come up with five or six or so. So let's do it right and explain why right is better than doing it wrong. Okay. Thinking is a thing you do a certain way. There's a right way to think and a wrong way to think, and thinking you're free is just not the right way to think.
I agree.
All right, let's first like come up with the definition of free will, because a lot of times people like they think like free will is like, well, we have more political freedom here in the United States than other countries. I mean, basically, I think we got to explain what the debate is about.
Well, I guess the original debate should be about just the word free, because obviously free just means not impeded by something. So in particular, so are we impeded by some rigid doctrine, right? There's no law that tells you to put left foot in front of right foot and then left foot in front of right foot. But obviously the law just ends up being, well, yes, it's to my advantage not to fall on the ground. So again, it all comes back to some sort of basic logic that's consistent with the rules of the game, right? The rules of the game is it's no fun having your face in the sidewalk. So yeah, do the right left thing.
Right. And as a comparison, if we had free will, what we did and thought and felt and all would be up to us. Not having free will gives us as much control over what we do than a puppet or a robot has. A puppet or robot has absolutely no control what they do. They're doing what they're programmed to do or what the puppeteer makes them do. That's the reality. That's what no free will is about.
Yeah.
But I guess you're basically just arguing it's what's the puppet master, and people will, like I said, if you give people the opportunity to make, say the unicorn did it, they're going to start blaming the unicorn, so you do have to come down to the bottom line that
don't blame the cosmic unicorn who created all.
So they always look for that out. But the real competition, the real battle is between the human nature, which is, the bug program, and some bigger idea program that would be logic and evidence and knowledge and all that kind of stuff. And so that's really what the debate is about, is which one wins. And somehow you've made a mistake that means something if you didn't figure out which one is the more rational impulse.
Okay, so David, explain to us what your understanding is of why free will is impossible, why we don't have it.
Why we don't have free will?
Right.
I'm not sure at the moment, to be perfectly honest with you.
Oh, all right. So trick.
Well, I'll answer it because it's a logical impossibility. You can't have something. First, you can't have the free part. That's impossible. There's no such thing. Free is a non-word, right? It's the white space word. So first you have to have a cage before you can even talk about free. And then you're just talking about what kind of cages are controlling us. And obviously the cage is cause and effect. That's the biggest cage, right? Cause and effect. Nobody's found something that happened without a cause. So right there you say, well, that cage isn't going anywhere. You can pretend it isn't there. You can walk into the bars all you want, but it's a cause and effect universe, and you're in that cage whether you like it or not.
Right. Okay. So one of the arguments I hear is, if we have no free will, then how can we blame people for their actions?
All right, that's a good question. Well, I mean, no. The idea is like, in order to uphold civilization, to get things done, we have to kind of like, quote unquote, pragmatically identify people. We don't blame them per se, but we identify this is the person who did this or that or whatever. And if it's a good thing, based on that identification, we reward the person because we're motivated by reward and punishment. And if it's a bad thing they do, then we have to punish them, again, based on not on the fact that we're quote unquote blaming them, but we have to identify the person as the person who did whatever was done.
Right.
Well, yeah, we have to identify the act, I think, is the important part. So once you're really just punishing the action, you're saying that we're establishing rules that are attached to this action. So it's not really personal, but if you commit the action, you're going to be labeled by that as one of your properties, mass murderer or whatever. That's going to be one of your properties, and that's not a good property to have, because we're establishing that the rule is people who commit this act will have this associated punishment for the purpose of deterrence So you're kind of doomed if you do that.
Hey,
David has.
hey,
Go ahead, Chan.
yeah, how I was going to explain it is that, like, the way that you, like what George was saying, how you pragmatically blame, and I don't like to use the word blame, but here's the way I look at it. I look at it as like a tornado. Like, you see a town was destroyed, and you see the tornado cause that destruction. But you don't feel this deep anger and hatred and want to seek revenge on the tornado. Even though, yes, that tornado was the cause of the destruction, which you don't like, it is just as causal, stemming from prior causes, as what a human does. The difference between how we treat humans and the way we treat a tornado has to do with the fact that, well, tornadoes appear and then they disappear after they're done doing their destruction, you know. But humans stay with us, and that's why we have to protect ourselves. That's the purpose of locking them away when they are too dangerous to be
Well,
allowed.
I think we're conceding the existence of free will in a sense with the very idea that we know the other tornadoes are watching, and logically they will be able to see that, oh, look, that tornado got thrown in jail and he got a bad spanking for being a nasty tornado, and I don't want that happen to me. So we're basically, by creating the idea of deterrence, is really a concession to the fact that people are educatable, and you can educate them by showing them an example of what happens to a nasty tornado. So if you're a tornado and you just go by the town and don't ruin it, you don't get in trouble. But if you go through the town and throw all the people upside down and stuff, they'll all get mad and you'll get pitchforked, and so the
Yeah.
fact is that you can't really compare it to an material object, just because people can be educated, and that's all we're really talking about is the tornado of education, the spiral of learning, and people need to learn to be able to act as if they learned, right? You can't expect people to be nuclear physicists if you didn't teach them any physics, and you can't expect people to be ethical if you don't teach them any ethics.
Right. Hey, I want to respond to what he just said there, because I think what we're actually getting at is we're talking about the thing about a mutable, meaning changeable, as opposed to immutable, unchangeable. Like, is our will mutable or immutable? Is it changeable or not? And I think that's the key distinction between tornadoes, is that they aren't like conscious, living biological objects which learn, whereas because we have memories and do learn, we are changeable, whereas other things that are not conscious aren't so changeable.
Well, and we're changeable by example. So again, it's still always going to come down to that you got the same dilemma. I mean, I never really felt about the criminal. Some people think people are just being petty when it comes to incarceration of prisoners. But I always, even when I didn't have an opinion on free will, let's put it that way, I still always saw them as broken people. I never really called criminals anything other than, you just had to be really broken to think it was okay to do what that guy did. So I didn't see them as, necessarily something to blame. I just saw them as something to prevent. I mean, you want to really prevent, bro. You want to prevent the spread of rabies. So yeah, sometimes you got to shoot some rabid dogs,
Yeah.
Right, David, how does that sound so far? Does it sound like, we can continue to uphold our criminal justice system and civilization, having overcome the illusion of free will?
Perhaps not currently the way it is, but with a little modification, yeah.
So,
if you put me in control, don't worry.
Because the idea is like,
he's not in control.
As much as I have sympathy, I'm still always going to buy that pound of prevention is worth an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. I'm always going to want to prevent. So I'm always going to have see a real value in bucking up and taking the hard hit of, you got to shoot the dog,
Let me, as an example of how we can apply this to ourselves, I read a book recently on willpower. And like sometimes we're trying to get ourselves to like diet or to do these chores we don't want to do and all. And people approach this lack of willpower, of enough willpower, in two different ways. Some people will get down on themselves and punish themselves and just really make themselves suffer thinking that that's going to motivate them to summon up enough willpower to get done what needs to get done. Other kinds of people, their natural way of dealing with something like that is to say, all right, well, like I wasn't able to do it, but I'm going to try harder. They're a lot more understanding and compassionate toward themselves in terms of this problem. Now, what they've determined, what they've, the studies have found is the people who don't punish themselves as much, who are much kinder to themselves, actually are able to get better at summoning up the willpower. So at least when it comes to ourselves, this idea, again, the free will belief is like, well, we did something wrong, and free will demands justice and vengeance and punishment. What we're saying is like, if we move from that paradigm, in a lot of cases, taking a more compassionate and intelligent approach will actually result in a better outcome.
Yeah, I don't want to get into a statistics argument, but those are always a little bit dangerous, right? Because when you succeed, you always say, yeah, I didn't have to work too hard because it was easy, because you succeeded. And when you fail, you're always doubly clinical or cynical about your effort being a failure. So it might be that people are just testifying different to exactly the same amount of guilt they dumped on each other. But when you use the guilt and you fail, it's going to be more obvious that that's why you failed. Where the person who succeeds is going to say, no, I wasn't too hard on myself. I was just the right amount of hard on myself. You know what I mean? So it's going to be a different kind of testimony based on your outcome. So obviously the failures are going to have a negative view anyway, and they've even negated their own negative attitude. You know what I mean? They've made it even double negative now. So I'm just saying that's that syndrome you end up with, that and kind of self-testifying about what works. But I guess I just want to say I'm sort of an advocate for being a better person through negative reinforcement rather than positive. I kind of say the things that have made me a better person are the ones that humiliated me or did something kind of psychologically negative, because the stick was a lot louder than the applause for me personally.
Okay. Well, Trick, apart from this, this idea of being able to navigate our imperfections, the imperfections of others better, what other benefits can the world derive? What is this, what are we trying to do in getting the world to overcome this illusion of free will?
We're trying to get them to not blame people in a certain context. So there's different ways to blame people, and like Gary said, the rabid dog situation, we don't actually blame a rabid dog for biting people, but yet we still prevent that rabid dog from doing what it's doing. But I think the more people that recognize that people are more like rabid dogs, or irrational people are more like rabid dogs, the more we can solve the problem of the rabid dog. In other words, we can look to see what's causing the rabies to begin with, what's causing the causal progression that's leading to the negative state.
Yeah, I think that's the key thing, is just to recognize that once you know it's programming, it's it's garbage in, garbage out, or grade in, grade out. So you just have to put the grade in. So you have to realize that you can't expect to raise a kid in a sewer, in a slum, and say, well, why isn't he playing the violin? And why isn't he being a nice, polite person on the street? And why isn't all, it's just silly to think, why aren't they an elegant human being when you didn't do anything to make them elegant?
Right. Just basically what we're doing is we're solving the symptoms, but not the problem. So right now, a lot of times we're focusing totally on the symptom, and we're not really back focusing on what the actual problem is. And I think
they're not giving them the tools. We're hitting them. It's like hitting a horse, and you're not showing him which direction he's supposed to go.
Right.
You know what I mean? Without giving them an instruction book of what they're supposed to be doing, there's no point in telling them they're wrong. Okay? You have to associate the behavior with the punishment, but you also have to show how you're supposed to be. You can't just say, don't be this, without showing them what they're supposed to be. And there's no real emphasis placed on the fact this is what it is to be a human being in a civilization, and this is why we have rules. And you have to sort of explain that the reason we have these rules is because in the end it's profitable for everybody. We all get to pay less and have more. And the whole point is that every time somebody commits a crime, it taxes us all. It takes frosting off of all of our cupcakes.
Hey, what
Right, but
Gary said is so true, and it just so happens that I was in a discussion on Facebook, on a comment thread about spanking children, about whether people should spank their children or not, and it was very interesting because people were pointing out, well, you don't just spank your kids and whip them with a belt just because they don't obey you. You have to give them a reason why something's the right or wrong thing to do. And a lot of parents, they just spank their kids every time that the kid does something that the parent doesn't like, and the kid has no clue why. That's a problem.
Yeah, I mean, it's like for me, it was always more effective when you saw the fear in your mother or father's eyes. You know, when you saw them actually afraid because you did something, and that's really why they're giving you a little bit of a pat, is to say, you scared the shit out of me. Please don't scare the shit out of me again. You know, don't do that. And so that's a kind of violence you can almost justify because it's a violence perpetrated out of a need to protect, not a need to punish. So it's not like looking for a way to control you by punishing you for no good reason. They're punishing you because they need to control you because there's an urgent necessity that you don't walk out into traffic.
Yes.
Right. And David, another reason has to do with like targeting our responses. In other words, like under the free will belief, you know, people in society do wrong. Let's say they live in inner cities, so they commit more crimes. So under the present system, we say to ourselves, well, they have a free will. Not everybody who lives in the city, inner city, is committing crimes. So the problem has to be with them, right? But, you know, if they don't have a free will, the problem isn't really with them. The problem is more clearly with the society that creates the kind of conditions where, you know, at least some people, you know, through no fault of their own, are going to succumb to the temptations to do crime. So in other words, it's shifting the like we were saying before, it's shifting our focus from the symptom, which is the person committing the crime, and thinking that like if we just punish them enough and we just scare everybody enough, that's going to, you know, solve the problem, to understanding, wait a minute, the person's doing what they're doing because society's structured in a certain way, because they're in a certain environment, and until we change the environment, we can't expect, you know, that much from the individual, because then the individual is subject to a lot of these kinds of like conditions that are not completely controlled. Now, I'm not saying that like we can't control some of their behaviors, but like at least part of the answer has to be from restructuring society.
Yeah, I think it's a performance issue, right? So you can almost compare it to cars. You don't expect whatever Honda to make, you know, a race car or something. You know what I'm saying? I mean, because they don't put the ingredients in. So you can sort of understand that some stores sell products that are, you know, they're cheaply made, right? So you don't expect the cheap thing to work as well as the thing that costs 5 times as much, as made out of real wood and all that kind of stuff. And it's just kind of silly that we can say, well, yes, sometimes the cheap thing does the job. But we know that over time, if you know, it's not going to be as durable, it's not going to be as reliable, and it's not going to be as dependable as producing that quality person, because it's going to take an exceptional cheap thing. Whether, you know, it's not going to be the average cheap thing that's going to work. It's going to be the exceptional cheap thing. So we're doing it on the cheap, and then we're expecting it to work as well as the thing that was made, you know, in the middle class, you know, cultured environment that had, you know, that played an instrument and had quiet time, and you know what I'm saying. I mean, it's quite obvious. Anybody can logically see that, you know, you can just imagine your own self and say, how could I become the person I am if I had to dodge bullets all day?
Exactly. And David, the other part of this, how does it resonate with you when we say that, like, well, we're not doing this simply for pragmatic reasons. I think we're also doing this for a proper understanding of who we are as human beings. In other words, like, you know, then almost the entire human race has the basic understanding of why we do things completely wrong. So how does this truth factor resonate with you?
It makes a lot of sense, to be honest. Yeah, but there's still roughly half the population that believes in things like capital punishment. So it's how to correct that problem.
Yeah, well, you got one of them in the room. I mean, I don't really see it as an issue of what we use as deterrence. Like I said, I value deterrence very much. So I'm all, you know, like I said, I'd rather prevent the crime with making suggestions to the logic of the criminal, because they all have some logic, right? They're a scheming mind, and you will change their behavior by changing what's going to happen to them by committing the behavior. So I'm just saying, if you make crime pay, people will do it.
Well, there is a statistic that shows that a lot of people do commit murders out of crimes of passion. So it's not really something that gets thought through. They don't think about the consequences.
Well, I'm not saying that doesn't ever happen, but I'm just saying it's still a calculation. And I'm just saying that if you give them something to calculate with, okay, if you give them ingredients in the math, okay, 1 divided by 7 million or something, and maybe they'll figure out, if you make that number, that denominator big enough or the numerator big enough, they'll come up with the answer that says, well, that's a 0 win. I ain't going to win that lottery. Okay, it's like having a tax on the lottery, right? If you put a tax on the lottery that's higher than the winnings, people will figure out, I'm not buying that ticket, okay?
And
that makes sense.
David, I think another thing, like decades ago, this crimes of passion defense was more respected. In other words, like, people recognized the person like was, really distraught, and so they couldn't really help themselves, and that was used. In today's climate, I don't know how it is in the UK, but in the United States, I don't think that defense is very effective anymore because this belief in free will is so strong. Right now, like in the United States, people will say, well, the crimes of passion defense is wrong because, like, if a person A could have like responded to the same situation without getting all distraught and all, then person B could have also. So in other words, like, basically they're operating from this free will perspective that people should have because people have a free will, they should be able to overcome their tendency to get all distraught to the extent that they commit a crime.
Well, I'm just saying that I think some of that zero tolerance stuff is just a fact. You know what I'm saying? I mean, I could make the penalty high enough for jaywalking where 99.99% of jaywalkers will stop jaywalking. Okay, I mean, if I have a death penalty for jaywalking tomorrow, everybody's going to be a little bit more aware of it, and they're going to say, "Yeah, it's really not it's not really not what we're dying for." So, I'm going to stop a lot of it. So I'm just saying we are programmable, and part of the programming is the examples we provide. So I'm just saying I still value deterrence. That's my only argument, is that I put a value on preventing it rather than cleaning up crime. So yeah, I'd rather prevent it through persuasion and logic and explain to people, look, you're a social animal. You exist in this circumstance. If you have to punch something, punch the inanimate object, not the sentient being, this kind of stuff. Just explain how to deal with your anger, deal with your frustration in rational ways. You're allowed to yell at people. You're allowed to get angry. You're just not allowed to start breaking stuff.
Okay, and David, again, how does the truth factor resonate? How does it seem to you that, like, the world is so completely deluded about who we are as human beings?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people are oblivious to the fact that we're all kind of victims of our environment to a certain degree. So yeah, I see that all the time.
Even more than that, David. In other words, like, we have no more control over what we do than does a puppet or a marionette or a robot. Like, that's a categorically, fundamentally opposite perspective from what we have now. Right now, we're walking around the planet thinking that stuff is up to us and absolutely nothing is up to us. That's why I think Searle said this, for the world to overcome this belief would be a bigger revolution in human thinking that has ever happened on the planet.
Right.
Yeah.
My only qualification to that is I think the part of it that's important to recognize is that we are bugs, that we're machines, as you're basically saying, and that the machine is only going to be as good as what you program it to be. It's only going to play the violin as well as it practices. All these things are required. You have to learn before you can function. And people sort of have this idea that I can know economics and I can know chemistry and I can know physics because I watched an hour-long TV show. I'm a qualified. I've done all the work necessary to have a qualified opinion. So everybody's walking around with this notion that I'm just going to freely get the right answer, and the right answer isn't going to be free. Knowledge isn't free. You have to do this work of acquiring knowledge to have competency and proficiency and all of that stuff. It is not free, and people just sort of have this notion that I'm on Earth, I have a mouth, I can talk. Well, it's a little more complicated than that.
Hey, and
what if it was 2 hours?
Yeah, well, it's getting close. Okay, it's close.
Hey, here's how I can sum up the problems that humanity faces. Basically, we walk around, most of us, with this daily assumption that other people have the access to all the same information, that they know all the same things that we know, that they have the same desires that we have. We make the assumption thinking that everyone is like us when they have different genetics, they had different parents, were taught different things, grew up in different places, got used to different cultures. And so when you start understanding that, you think of this person, you look at someone do something stupid and you think, well, they should have done this. I would have done that in that situation. But here's the deal. If you were in that situation, you would be that person who was in that situation doing that thing, and you have their memories, their level of intelligence, their experiences. You would do what they did, and they would be doing what you would do in every situation in your life. And that's the
Yeah.
equality that I see.
Yeah, I like the idea of just seeing through people's heads and just seeing the fact that they are gears and just recognizing, oh, I can see they have that broken gear over there. And they're just recognizing like a lawnmower or something. Oh, yeah, it's not going to be able to cut the grass because, yeah, that drive gear is broken. Look at all the teeth that are missing. So, yeah, this guy needs a better gear,
Right. Yeah, we got to look at them as conscious gears, though. So when we use words like puppet and things like that, I think we kind of take away some of that. People start to think that, that implies that they're not conscious, but in reality, it's the whole causal process is a conscious process, and that means how we learn and how we understand things.
I think George would say
part of the process.
No, it's a subconscious process. So that your consciousness is a victim. Your consciousness is tied up in the theater seat. Your consciousness doesn't do anything. It can't even get up and go get a glass of water. It just has to watch what happens to you happen to you. The crap comes out of your mouth whether you like it or not. I mean, I don't get to edit myself before I just said that. My consciousness is totally just sitting here saying, "Oh, wait, Gary's doing stuff. Oh no!"
Right, because it's part of the causal process.
Well, I'm just saying that but it's not a conscious process.
Yeah, it is. I mean, your subconscious leads to your conscious process, which leads to the next subconscious process.
No, I'm saying I totally disagree. There's no conscious process. Your consciousness doesn't do anything but watch.
I would agree with Gary. In other words, like the processing of the decision is all done in the unconscious, and then consciousness is just like we becoming aware of what the unconscious has done.
Yeah, but the processing of the subconscious happens because of the consciousness that happens. So if I'm talking to you right now, you're processing my information, and then it's coming through a subconscious process to output your next. So it's part of the process.
Every element of the real active ingredients, the active moving parts, are all subconsciously thrown. So I'm just saying the consciousness doesn't itself do a single thing. Every reaction or reflexive thing that happens.
Guys, so we're going on. Gary, we're going on. Like, we've got about 2 minutes left. This is an excellent theme. If you guys want to stick around, like the unconsciousness versus the consciousness and the decision making, I think people need to understand this. Well, we got another 2 minutes left in this. I just wanted to say the reason I bring up this idea of our having no more control than a puppet or a robot is simply to demonstrate what it would be to have a free will and what it is to not have a free will, right? But Trick, what you were saying before is very important. People don't like to see themselves as robots or puppets. So it's one plus that we can say, fine, we're not robots and puppets without consciousness. We're robots and puppets with a consciousness. But I still don't think that's enough for people. We have to come up with somewhat kind of way to get people to accept the fact that they're conscious puppets and like it somehow.
I like it.
I'm perfectly comfortable just saying I'm a victim. So, yeah, I think that's just great. They tied me in the chair. What did I have to do with any of this, right? I didn't do any of it. So it works for me.
Cool. All right. We've got like 50 seconds left. Gary, you want to close it up?
Yeah, okay. Yeah, it's a good conversation. I really think it is a mind conversation. Really, it's just understanding the operating instructions of being a human being. Human beings have this brain thing. It has gears in it. You have to understand the gears make you behave. So you got to polish them and you got to oil them with knowledge and you got to take care of them and shine them and all that crud. And they got to be made out of strong material. And so you just knowing those, that's how you build the character. Characters build out of something. It's not built out of nothing. You can't raise kids in slums and then say, why doesn't it have character? Well, because you didn't give it any good gears. I mean, its gears got a bunch of dirt in it. you know.
Excellent. 10 seconds.
Yeah, so I think we've done our job. So till next time, till the next exciting episode when Superman will do all kinds of special things.